Australian native birds are known for having many positive traits. Their exotic and colourful feathers, the beautiful melodies they sing from their beaks, their friendly and outgoing behaviour towards other animals and humans. One iconic bird species, however, is an unfortunate outlier. Ibises in Australia are infamously associated with all things grotesque, unhygienic, and downright grotty. Dumpster divers, tip turkeys, sandwich snatchers, picnic pirates, and bin chickens are just a few of the names we use to describe them. They're known as the one bird that lives for the next bin day, congregating in local parks and tips for their next meal. But are they really as nasty as it seems? Should we really be brushing them off as just another pest to be exterminated? Let's find out. Believe it or not, there are actually more than one species of ibis in Australia. It's not like Australia is the 7th largest country in the world or anything. But before we look at that, we must first understand what counts as an ibis. We all know how particular our beloved scientists are. Ibises are a subfamily of small to medium-sized wading birds known as the Thruskiornithidae. I can never pronounce these Latin phrases, can I? They are characterised by their long, narrow beaks that bend towards the ground, their long necks, and their stick-like legs. In Australia, we have 3 different species of ibis: the glossy ibis, straw-neck ibis, and the most infamous type, the Australian white ibis. As I said previously, the primary characteristic of ibises are their long necks, long bills, long legs, and, well, long everything. But not every characteristic is shared between each species of ibis. The glossy ibis is the smallest species of ibis on Earth, measuring between 48 and 61 centimeters. It has exclusively dark feathers, but varies between the maroon neck and head to the dark blue and cyan wings. While the bill is still long, it's a light crimson pink. It also possesses a white lining around its eyes. It's easily the most beautiful species of ibis down under. But as we all know, beauty tends to be uncommon, and this bird is no exception. Of the 3, it is the rarest in suburbia, being found primarily in swamps, lakes, and mudflats. Next is the straw-neck ibis. Straw-neck ibises are considerably larger, measuring in at 59 to 76 centimeters in length. Unlike the glossy ibis, they have no feathers on their head, only a bald, naked, goblin-like head. Come to think about it, ibises are kinda like the Cyrax of birds. That's only if their reputation turns out to be true. Even then, it's kind of an insult to ibises. Anyway, their plumage is similar to the white ibis, with the exception of the wings and the neck. The neck has straw-like feathers, hence the name straw-neck ibis, whereas the wings are black, unlike the Australian white ibis, which has white wings. The plumage sheens in the sunlight, emitting a dark blue, green, and red colour as it reflects the sunlight. Then, there's the most common subspecies. The Australian white ibis. This is the most common and therefore most infamous ibis type. They look almost exactly like the straw-necked ibis. Actually, I'm wrong here. Straw-neck ibises look almost exactly like the Australian white ibis. The only difference is the wing colours and the neck. As entailed by the name, white ibises have white wings. They do have a black tail though. Their heads are also black and naked like their straw-necked brethren, with black beaks and legs to complement. They can measure in at 65 to 75 centimeters and weigh between 1 to 2.5 kilos. Not all ibises live in Australia. Not all ibises are disgusting bin chickens that steal food from unsuspecting picnickers. Or at least that's what they say. Anyway, we're focusing on the 3 aforementioned species here. As we all know, all 3 species of ibis reside in Australia. The white ibis's primary abode is in the north and east of the country. They choose to avoid the dry, arid inland zones, which is why they didn't inhabit the west until the 1950s. It doesn't explain why they don't inhabit Tasmania. They prefer the coastal and wetland lifestyles in places such as lagoons, marshes, floodplains, grasslands, and estuaries. Ibises are carnivores, but don't let their long beaks scare you. They only use them to dig aquatic invertebrates out of the mud. The ibis's favourite meals include fish, crustaceans, amphibians, and insects such as worms. Strawneck ibises are almost identical to white ibises with their living preferences, inhabiting the wetter areas of the country, but they've also been spotted in New Zealand, Tasmania, the Pacific, and the island of New Guinea. They aren't as adaptable as their white counterparts, preferring to live in grasslands, croplands, and pastures, where their diet gives it the nickname, farmer's friend. See? Not everyone hates ibises. In fact, they're even useful. They feed on insects, such as grasshoppers and locusts. But they also like frogs, fish, and other small critters. Surprisingly, while glossy ibises are the most difficult to spot in Australia, they're the most widespread of the three species. They live in Australia, Africa, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, India, and the Americas. They've also been spotted in European countries such as France, and even the UK. Like the others, they prefer to live in the wetlands such as swamps and lakes, with a diet consisting of frogs, spiders, fish, snails, and other aquatic insects. Now, let's talk about the life cycle. It was a nice, sunny day down at the local tip. This was the ideal meet-up space for the annual Ibis trash guzzling competition. As the crowd gathered to watch the spectacle, Mr. Ibis sat in the back row. During the break, he stumbled upon a sight worthy of starting the next Trojan War. Miss Ibis. She was stunning. Her feathers were the cleanest shade of white he'd ever seen. Her head was naked and somehow shiny. And who could forget the beautiful, long, dark beak? She was absolutely irresistible. Unfortunately for Mr. Ibis, she had an army of simps following her around, asking for her number, constantly complimenting her, and giving her gifts. It was a lost cause for Mr. Ibis. He wasn't capable of lowering himself to such low standards. So he flew back home and cried himself to sleep. Because modern day dating is f***ed. But then, as the dark void of the night consumed him, his phone lit up and made a small ding sound. It was Miss Ibis! The excitement for Mr. Ibis was palpable, but with that came a worrying feeling. What if he messed up? What would she think of him? Would his status among the flock descend into the absolute bottom of the barrel? You know what? F*** it, he thought to himself. I'll just be my true, unapologetic self. I'll show her the true me. And if she doesn't like it, then so what? It's not the end of the world or anything. So he texted back. He ranted about his hatred of feminism and the current totalitarian government run by wussy simps. And surprisingly, she liked it. So they got together, went on a couple of dates, and decided to get married after only 3 weeks. They lived happily ever after. Until Mrs. Ibis found a GigaChad 666, 6 figures, 6-pack, 6 inches. Yeah, that was kind of a joke. even by human standards. Ibis males can still be simps though. Breeding season usually goes from August to May the next year. First, they'll find a branch of a tree where the nest can be built. He waits for a female to arrive. While he does this, he makes noise, getting mad if he gets a wrong match, or if there just so happens to be a gay ibis in the area. When a female does finally arrive, he will bow down to her and offer her his finest stick. If she accepts, they will fly away to another location and begin building the nest. Don't know why they do this. Couldn't they just stick to the area that he was at? Usually, they'll build their nests in colonies with other ibises and similar birds, possibly as a means of staying strong against predators. Their nests are made from twigs, leaves, grasses, and reeds. Once that's done, the female will lay 2 to 3 eggs. The life of an ibis begins in the egg. I know I explained this in my previous 2 videos about birds, but it's still important, so I'm going to tell you again, okay? First, the egg will start as a small cell located in the ovary, but the next sequence of events will be kicked off once the female undergoes some hormonal changes. The cell will increase in size and a yolk will form. Then, the cell will travel into the oviduct, where it may or may not get inseminated depending on the bird's preference. Either way, it'll continue past the oviduct, where the membrane and albumin are formed. After this, it will form into the oval sphere that we all know and love, with the final piece of the puzzle being the shell. If the egg gets fertilized by Mr. Ibis's seed, then the growth of the cell into a chick will also commence. A pointed, thickened layer of cells will develop in the tail end of the embryo. These are the head and tail of the bird in making. Next comes the cardiovascular system, which includes organs such as the heart and lungs. The final body parts to be developed before hatching are the beak, limbs, claws, and feathers. Depending on the ibis variant, the eggs are incubated by the parents for approximately a month before the chick hatches. Welcome to the world, child. You may start off with no feathers on your body, vulnerable to the elements and any potential predators, but don't worry, your parents will look after you and your siblings, feeding you through regurgitation like most other bird species. They will protect you until you're ready to leave the nest in approximately 30 to 50 days after you've hatched. Don't let that intimidate you. Ibises are social birds, so you will remain a part of the colony for life, unless you want to move to another one. Your parents may even still feed you for a month after leaving the nest. The world can be a cruel place. Only through sticking together can we brace for the worst it has to offer. You know how I said ibises prefer living in swamps, marshes, and grasslands, and how they like to eat crustaceans and insects? Well, as we all know, humans have been humaning all over the place for centuries, and it's only been getting worse as time goes on. Because of our antics, the natural habitats of ibises have been shrinking. Some have even completely diminished. There's a saying, if you can't beat them, join them. Ibises have taken this expression to a whole another level. If you're an Aussie, go to your local park or botanical gardens. They're absolutely f***ing everywhere. If you're a farmer, just step outside and look at your pastures. Absolutely f***ing everywhere. Why do they inhabit so many human areas? You know, where humans like to go with their lunches, snacks, and picnics? Gee, I wonder why. Regardless of their reasons why, many humans still cannot see reason and despise these birds, being repulsed by their nasty habits and appearances. But is this really the case? One of our biggest flaws in mindset is the idea that things have to be one way or another. Democrat or Republican, left wing or right wing, good or bad. But the truth of the matter is that life is more complex than we are led to believe. Whilst they do like scavenging human scraps from bins, park benches, and wherever they can, this doesn't automatically make them an inherently nasty creature. If you were in their position, you'd probably do the same thing. Who else would be using all the scraps? It's better for resources to be used by someone or something rather than for them to be not used at all. In fact, recent studies have shown ibises to be making contributions towards controlling another, much worse, foreign pest, cane toads. They've been observed using the stress and wash technique to remove the toxins from cane toads to ensure that they're edible. Once they complete the process, they'll make a delicious meal for them. As an Australian, I've always hated the sight of cane toads and the effects their presence has on the native wildlife. Seeing ibises being capable of devouring them unharmed is an incredibly promising sign that cane toad populations can be controlled. And as for their looks, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. While some may think ibises are ugly with their long beaks and legs, that doesn't make them automatically nasty. From my experiences with ibises, they're friendly and cautious around humans. They'll gladly accept a treat and politely wait for you without harassing you like seagulls. But for the most part, they'll keep to themselves. Yes, sometimes they can be annoying, like a dog scrounging for food, but usually that's the worst they'll get. I hear people say that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. This is usually applied to dating when the hot guy/girl rejects the ugly person. But if you think you're ugly and that ugly people should be treated better, apply this principle in every part of your life. You may not think ibises look good, but that doesn't make them any less entitled than you to life. We all have a right to live. So the answer to this question is yes and no. Yes, they can be grubby. Yes, they eat human scraps. But they're not as nasty as people think. In fact, they make many valuable contributions to society. Just don't try to catch and eat them. You'll end up in prison.